Good evening, or at least it's evening where I am. Good morning if it's morning for you, afternoon if it's afternoon for you, whatever. Good day. The Australians have it right. How are you doing? I am here live to talk about StoryADay, writing, StoryADay May, the Superstars community that's opening up at StoryADay at the moment. Just anything you want to talk about. I'm going to take you through a strategy tonight for writing a story in 40 minutes, which I know it sounds, one of the things that I sent out a survey recently, and one of the answers I always get from people is that they don't have enough time to write. So I want to prove to you that you can write something. You can write a complete story in 40 minutes. So I'm going to take you through that exercise. If you are here, you've probably seen this before. This is the short story framework. See if my light can pick that up. Short story framework. It's a way of, again, short-circuiting all the choices that go into writing a story. So I'm going to use that, and then I'm going to talk you through how to use that to write a story in 40 minutes, which is going to be a really useful skill if you're taking part in StoryADay May, which is coming up in 3 days. And we've got some great guest prompters, Roxanne Gay, Fran Wild, A.T. Greenblatt, Disha Villiaw, Michael X. Wang, Matthew Salisis, I always forget somebody. It's like the Seven Dwarfs. I always forget, I was mean to mention everybody, or a whole slew of people. There's a whole slew of people who have given us prompts. Lots of people who are publishing and doing well with short stories. Lots of people who are winning awards. So yeah, that's coming up in a couple of days. So this afternoon I came on here and talked about what people told me they struggled with and what their blocks are around writing. So if you haven't seen that, you can go back and have a look at that. If that's what's causing you problems. I also asked on that survey that I sent out, I also asked questions about what specifically right now, excuse me, what specifically right now is causing you problems. And obviously when I asked this question last year, it was like, oh my goodness, the world has ended. This year it's like, oh my goodness, I'm just tired. A lot of people are tired. But it's another season, we're shifting into another season here, and I think we've all kind of realized we need to make this work. So a lot of people are turning back towards their writing. One of the comments I get from a lot of people is, I'm so busy, because they've got work, they've got kids, they've got parents to look after, or maybe they've got the world on Zoom who just invited them to every single writers conference and concert and whatever else is out there. So the whole year kind of just disappeared in a blur of experiences, which is actually not that bad a problem. We need to have stuff to write about. The people who are just super busy and burned out, yes, I hear you. And I know it feels like you don't have enough time. I suspect part of what you don't have is enough time for you. And there may be ways to get that. And it might be just putting writing dates on your calendar and telling the people in your life that you're going to have half an hour or 40 minutes, for example, to go and do something for you. Because we know this, but it's hard to make the change. We know that if we are not fueled as creative people and just as human beings, if you're not looking after your health, if you're not drinking enough water, pauses for an opportune sip of water. If you are not filling yourself intellectually, if you're not outputting stuff creatively, it's just harder to be happy. It's harder to be any good to anyone else. And I know there are times and seasons when it's really hard to hear that message, and you're looking at me and you're like, you have no idea. True, I have no idea. However, I will say this. When my currently 16-year-old was a tiny little baby, his older sibling did not sleep. He wasn't so bad. I was nursing. I was with them all day. We live 3,000 miles away from our family, so I was with them all day. My husband would come home and he had recently got into board games and he wanted to play. So we'd get the elder kid into his cot at least, and the younger one would nurse, and then we'd put him in a little bassinet. And then we'd be like, let's play this new game, this Settlers of Catan or some complicated Euro game. And I would sit at the table and I'd be like, there is nothing I would less rather to do than play a game right now. But I found that spending time with my husband, learning something which was intellectually challenging as a young mother, actually kind of revived me a little bit. And although I was still tired physically, doing something intellectually stimulating that has a fun component to it, that is with people you like, doesn't really matter how tired or burned out you feel. It's a different kind of energy that it uses. So bear that in mind as we go into this month of StoryADay May. It's extreme writing. There are going to be days when you get to the end of the day and you haven't written your story yet, and you're like, I do not want to write tonight. If you just make an effort to carve out that time, give yourself the space, even to make some notes about a story, I almost guarantee that you will come away from that somewhat revitalized. Even if you're physically tired, even if you're emotionally wrung out, just taking that time to be with your creative self is a huge gift. And I've talked to people in the Superstars group about, what I asked them, because they've been with me for a while now, and I asked them, what is different when your writing is going well? And I didn't mean like in a writing session. It was more of a kind of whole life question. And I got answers that probably would have surprised someone who isn't a writer, but didn't really surprise me at all, because it was things like, I can make decisions better. I can, the rest of my life is easier somehow. My day job doesn't seem like such a burden. And that was not the case in reverse. So if the day job was going well, it didn't make the writing life better. But if the writing life was going well, it made the day job better. I know for me, my family likes me better when I'm writing, to the point that they will tell me, go and write something. And I have that luxury now because my kids are a little bit older. But at the beginning, when I started this in 2010, I had to negotiate and say, I'm going to write now, and y'all need to leave me alone. And luckily, I got some cooperation on that front. But it's not about asking permission. It's about saying, this is what I'm doing. I'm looking for support, and I'm not going to abuse it, but this is what I need to do. So if you are one of those people who is thinking, I have no time to write, let me share with you how I have written stories in 40 minutes and taught other people to write stories in 40 minutes. And one more sidebar before I get to it. I also saw the opposite comments from people. And if you have questions, you can pop them in the chat there. Let me know, what you're interested in hearing about. But the other thing that I heard from people regarding time to write was that either they're too busy or they have too much time, which sounds really weird, but I get a lot of this from people who've either left a job, lost a job, retired, or, carved out some other way time to write. And what they discover is that having all the time in the world actually makes it hard to get to the writing at all. There's just the things you have to do just expand to fill the time available. So don't wait until you're retired, because A, you'll be older and more tired, and B, if you haven't put the habits and the motivation in place now, when you get there, it's going to be just the same. You're going to find other ways to fill your time. So you may have seen the short story framework, where I take you through this little plan for a short story. One type of short story, I encourage you to come up with a noun. In my case here on the example, I've got a mummy, an adjective for that person, an ambitious mummy, and something that they want. So my ambitious mummy is pursuing acceptance at a prestigious college for her kid. So they take the first action. In this case, they hire a tutor, but it doesn't help. And because of that, now this is where your story gets interesting and you get to choose which way it goes. I chose she hires someone to take the test for her kid, but he gets caught. And because of that, and again, you're at a fork in the road. You can go anywhere you want, complicate it, resolve it, whatever you want. I chose to have her hire a hitman to take out the ringer before he testifies against her. Until, and you'll recognize this from the Pixar framework if you've heard of that one, something changes, right? You have to, at some point, you have to start closing down the story. So her husband intervenes and tries to talk sense into her. And then, so I have options here in my example. I could either have her turn herself in and face the consequences, or I could have her torch her house and prepare to flee to Mexico. And then the ending of my story is going to be an image that sort of sums up her personality or the journey she's been on or the journey she's failed to take. And in my case, I had two options. I had her sipping a last oversized glass of white wine in her vast kitchen before preparing to turn herself in and do the right thing. I didn't find that very interesting. I preferred the end of the story where she's standing outside the smoking ruins of the house with her passport in her hand, because that's how I roll. So if I was going to write that story, but I only had 40 minutes to do it, here's what I would do. And you can either grab a pen right now and take notes, or you can come back and watch the replay of this. If I'm smart and remember, I have a handout about this and I might put it in the comments. So you can check that again tomorrow. Should have thought of that beforehand, didn't, sorry. Okay, so if you're going to write a story in 40 minutes, it's not easy. It's a sprint. It takes a whole bunch of like snap decisions. And it's a really great exercise for not overthinking, which of course, as writers, we do all the time. So first 5 minutes, I want you to grab your phone when you're writing a story in 40 minutes. Grab your phone, grab a timer somewhere, something you can time yourself with. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Use the framework to come up with and brainstorm your story. If you've done this before the challenge, you can just grab one of your completed frameworks and you can go, right, this is me. And then you can spend 5 minutes massaging the need, the desire, and the first, and because of that. So that's all you're doing. You're just brainstorming for the first 5 minutes. Sounds like a lot of time, not a lot of time. The next 10 minutes takes us up to the 15-minute mark. You're going to write that. You're going to write the opening where you're going to tell us who the character is, where they are. You're going to paint a picture of where they are, when they are, and what their desire is. And you don't do it like Jane was an ambitious mummy who wanted to get her kid into prestigious college. You paint a picture of her in that kitchen, if you're going back to the kitchen at the end, and you have her on the phone to her friend, and she's using language and that marks her as an ambitious sort of upper middle class mummy. Maybe her kitchen is huge. Maybe her cell phone is the most expensive version. She's got a massive ring on her finger. You paint a picture of this woman how you want, and you set it, like the settings and the accessories that you choose, like the iPhone, that tells us it's contemporary. So you've got the setting there. She might use words that put her either in London or in LA, so that the reader are grounded. And you do all of this in the first paragraph. Take 10 minutes to write that and the first and because of that. So the first thing she does, the first action she does, in this case, hiring a tutor, or that's probably happened off screen in a short story. So maybe she's having a conversation on the phone about how she hired the tutor, but it hasn't worked. And maybe the friend on the phone tells her what she can do next. Well, you need to get a ringer to take the test for her. How do I do that? And then you can go into that scene and you can show her hiring the guy. So you've got your first 10 minutes, first 15 minutes is you brainstorming, writing the opening and getting to that first action. The next 20 minutes, I'm giving 20 minutes to this because it's complicated. The middle of a story is always complicated. write 2 more complications. So because of that, she hires the tutor, or she's telling her friend that she hired a tutor and it hasn't worked. Then you get to spend 20 minutes taking us into the scene where she hires someone to take the test. And then we get to see the fallout when that doesn't work and she hires a hitman. Maybe you spend most of your time on the part where she hires the hitman. Whichever of these, and because of that, feels like more fun, feels like you can get into the character more, feels like it's going to tell us more and involve the reader more emotionally, that's the one that you spend most of the time on. Now, while you're writing this, you may not have filled in anything else at the bottom of this framework while you're brainstorming, because you might be like me and you might only be able to write as far as the headlights show. So you might, as you're writing and complicating things, your brain will start to provide possible solutions. And you can jot them down here. You'll get a sense for the character and how you feel about the character and about how you want things to turn out, whether you want her to get away with it, whether you want her to get her comeuppance, whether you want her to have a road to Damascus experience and see the light. So you'll write towards that. And when I say that, whatever sounds the most fun to you, that covers all kinds of writing styles. I have a friend who considers, I have several friends actually, who consider writing dark, twisted, really creepy stories delicious. And that's fun for them. So whatever your definition of fun when you're writing is, that's what I'm talking about. If you like making people happy, then that's what you're writing towards. I always like to think about the emotions you're trying to conjure in the reader at any point in the story. So fun for you, fun for the reader. In the last 5 minutes, because now we've spent 15 minutes on the opening, 20 minutes complicating things, which if I'm doing my math right is 35 minutes, you've got 5 minutes left. When your timer beeps for 35 minutes and you've got 5 minutes left, write an ending. Even if you've got like a big gap where there should be a transition from all the fun you were having and you're like, no, but it's so fun. I want to stay in this scene and I want to keep writing. Timer goes off for 35 minutes. Write an ending. Even if you have to put brackets in and go, clever stuff happens here. Writers do that all the time. Find out how she gets from here to there. Make yourself a note and keep moving, because when you write an ending, when you take 5 whole minutes to craft, maybe you're crafting that final image that echoes the opening image, or maybe you're coming up with a poetic line, a poetic couplet that echoes something about the theme, something the character has learned. When you spend 5 minutes on that, you think you've got the story. You'll never know the story better than you do at the moment. Well, you will, but it's the best you've known the story so far. So you've got that, everything in here. It's all like back here. Actually, I don't know the anatomy of the brain, but it feels like it's back here. And as you put an ending on your story, you will find that you suddenly realize what the story was about. You may have wandered around a bit, especially at the beginning, thinking you were going to write one kind of story. And then when you get into that meaty bit in the middle, you'll be like, oh, I think this is actually about somebody who's running away from her own experience at college and you know, that time when she encountered that guy and something terrible happened. And that you might discover that the story is about something completely different. So write that ending. Write an ending that echoes that. Think when you're writing the ending about how you want the reader to feel on the way out of your story. When they put your page down and they go, whoa, is that whoa? Or is it whoa? You know, think about the Keanu Reeves school of writing, right? What do you want the reader to feel? I like the reader to feel clever, so they saw it coming right before I wrote it. Because if the reader feels clever after they've read one of my short stories, then they like me because I made them feel clever. And they remember me, and then they want to read more of my stuff. Little manipulative, but that's, you know, it's part of the to and fro between the writer and the reader. If you want to tack on an optional 5 minutes at the end of your 40-minute story, I recommend reading the whole thing over briefly and making some notes for when you come back to it. This is especially useful during StoryADay May when you're writing one of these every day. And you might take more than 40 minutes some days, but during StoryADay May, when you are writing 31 stories, if those are the rules you've set for yourself, because you're allowed to set your own rules, you'll forget, right? You will not be in that moment again where the story is all here. So make some notes for yourself. Like, even if at the beginning of the story they went to New York and you're like, no, it should be Miami, don't correct it. Just like when you do that final read through, right, wouldn't it be fun if this was in Miami instead? Because, and make yourself some notes about what's going on. You will have ideas when you get into that middle section about massively complicated digressions, extra characters. This will want to become a novel if it's going well. Write those things down, put them in a different document, come back to them tomorrow, next week, next month. This is a short story. It hinges on one moment, one decision, one life-changing thing. So that's how you write a 40-minute story. I'm not pretending it's easy. It's a race. It's kind of exhausting, but it's extremely exhilarating as well. And you don't have to do this every day, but if you need it, here it is. This is a technique that you can use. If you are really struggling, write somebody else's story. Mash up two things, rewrite a fairy tale, a bedtime story, reimagine Atlas Shrugged if the characters were bunny and the bunnies in the railroad was a super warren. Reimagine Emma, but set it in an LA high school. Oh no, somebody already did that. You can mash up and steal and borrow and be inspired by other people's worlds, other people's characters, especially during StoryADay May, because you're just like, you're proving to yourself that you can write. Okay. I think I've spoken quite a lot there. Any questions for me from people who are here on the call? I'm looking at my little comments box. I think it brings in comments from everywhere, so I should be able to see you no matter where you're watching this. Although I know there's a little bit of a delay when it goes live on Facebook, so if you're watching me there, I'm about 10 seconds behind. Not seeing any comments right now because I think I've probably, you're probably going, that was a lot. So that was a lot. I'll send out the handout to the mailing list tomorrow. I'm looking for something to write it down with. You would think a writer would have pens handy, but I tidied my desk. Anyway, if you don't see it tomorrow, you can email me and say, where's my handout? All right. So that's how you write a story in StoryADay May, even if you've only got 40 minutes. It's kind of fun because there's no expectation of writing a good story. So when you do write something you like, which is surprisingly often, even if there's just one paragraph that you really like, that keeps you coming back. So yeah. I have had some comments this week about both the StoryADay Challenge and the Superstars group that I've been talking about all week. We've got a bunch of new people who've joined us in Superstars. We've got some people who are renewing. We've got a lot of people who are renewing. It's exciting. There actually is a bunch of people in a Zoom room right now doing one of their first new writing sprints with us. So just having that accountability to make an appointment on your calendar and turn up for a writing sprint, that's happening in another room right now with one of my wonderful volunteers. If that's something that sounds appealing to you, do think about joining us in Superstars. One of the comments I got when I sent out my survey, someone said that their wife is less than supportive, and someone else, to be fair, said that their husband is less than supportive. One was like, they're just kind of clueless. They don't seem to have the gumption to entertain themselves, and I seem to be the one that has to entertain them. The other one said that their spouse thinks that their hobby is costing rather a lot and thinks that they should give it up. So I know that I am really lucky to have a very supportive spouse. He's a smart man. He knows that sometimes I'm not a psychotherapist, right? But I think about humans a lot because I'm a writer. And I study this stuff quite a lot. I've been doing a lot of studying recently about creating habits that last and creating meaningful change in your life that lasts longer than just that moment when you hit rock bottom. And I think when you have a spouse who is not behind you all the way in your writing, it's because they don't understand what it's doing. And most people outside the writing world don't know what success really looks like for a writer. Yeah, I mean, a bestseller is obviously a measure of success. A Netflix deal for your story is obviously a measure of success, but they are far from the only measures of success. And if your spouse is complaining, as in the one case where the hobby's too expensive, it may be that they're feeling neglected. It's not really about the expense. It's about them not getting enough of the best of you. Because I know that when I've done my writing, especially if I do my writing early in the day, I am able to give so much more to the people who live in this house. And if you're not getting your writing done, you're going to feel depleted. You're going to feel resentful. You're going to feel bitter because you're not you. And it's going to lead to you doing stuff that looks like you're writing or looks like you're pursuing this writing thing kind of half-heartedly. And that's going to take time away from your spouse or your partner, your other half, or the people you live with. But it's not going to return to them a whole and happy person. If you can carve out some time for writing, and I'm not saying ask permission, I'm saying, again, just say, this is what I'm doing, and don't overdo it. Like take an hour, don't take 3. And really focus, really find ways to get into your writing, get in and get out. This 40-minute method might be one of those things. And if you then turn around and you come out, you stand up from your desk and you're happy, you're kind of like wrung out, but exhilarated, and you go to your partner who needs your support. I mean, it's not easy to live with someone. You need to work at this stuff. And if you can go to them as the best, happiest, sexiest version of yourself, and then because you've got your writing done, you can lavish attention on them for half an hour instead of sitting beside them on the sofa for 90 minutes. Maybe maybe it's not about the money you're spending on the writing. Maybe it's about the energy you're not spending or the direction in which your energy is going. And maybe committing to your writing, even if it means spending some money, is going to be better for all of you. So there you are. Dr. Julie is in. I actually know a Dr. Julie, so I shouldn't say that. But it's interesting that, people kind of go either way on that one. It's like either they're not being supportive or either they don't, they want to spend time with you, and that's nice, but they want the best of you. So you're all going to be unhappy if that's not the case. Okay, hey, Maggie. Maggie has a question. I had the idea for a series of short stories that are connected. I love that. All the characters belong to a chess club. Oh, that's very in. Did you watch Queen's Gambit? I think you're onto something there. Tried to write most of the stories, but I find short stories to be difficult. Framework will make it possible to stop rambling on. It's hard to stop rambling on, as is probably evident from the fact that I've been standing here for half an hour rambling on. In a short story, in a first draft of a short story, it's okay to ramble on a bit, but you need to find the end eventually. And it's tough to do that because once you start, I used this analogy on the podcast a while ago. I was like, when you're getting ready to go out, you're opening all the drawers and you're trying on different tops and you're wrapping on different scarves and trying stuff out. And at some point, you have to start deciding what's coming with you and what's not, and you have to start putting things back in drawers. And when you've opened all of the drawers, when you're writing a story and you're like, and this character comes in and that thing happens and oh, that's amazing. And then eventually, if you want to get to the end of the story, you have to start closing those drawers. So this character came in, now that character has to leave. This thing happened, now I need to resolve that thing. This, feeling happened, here's an echoing feeling for that one. This decision was made, here's the end. With short stories, they really do tend to... there's another analogy that somebody uses, which is it's Bruce Holland Rogers. He says that a novel is like being invited into somebody's house and being invited to go through all the drawers and explore. Maybe you had an Airbnb rental and you're in the closets. Short stories are like looking in the window. All you can see is that much of the room. And if you're doing flash fiction, it's like looking through the keyhole. All you can see is that much of the room, like this tiny little bit. So I think that's useful to think about. Like, short stories are limited. You get a limited number of characters. You get a limited number of settings, because every time you introduce a new setting or character, the story balloons. I think if the short story framework is helpful, that would be great. I think it will be. I also think it's going to be helpful for you to make notes, especially because you're writing a collection of connected stories, which I genuinely love that idea. Anytime you find one of your secondary characters kind of like talking about their issues in a story that's supposed to be about, like, this is Bob's story. Jean, you go over there, right? Anytime you find that happening, when Jean comes in and start talking about her husband or whatever, just make notes in the margin, make notes in a document, and be like, Jean's got an issue with, her husband, and she really likes this particular, Lewis Chessmen replica set. So we're going to have to put that somewhere, but not in this story. So hopefully that will help, because you're far from alone. Short stories are tough. They're tough because everything has to count. Do allow yourself to ramble in a first draft a little bit, as long as you can get it to the end, because quite often you'll discover stuff while you're writing. And then when you go back through in the edit, you can be very sort of logical about which types of metaphor you keep, how the pacing works, what people sound like. You can take out all the words that you overuse. Don't worry about any of that in the first draft. But yeah, if you think about short stories being about one thing, one moment, one decision, one sort of life-changing or lightning bolt moment that changes everything for the character, at least for that moment. It's like in romance, they used to say you had to have a happily ever after. And nowadays it's considered to be, it's fine for you to have a happily enough for now ending. And it's the same thing with a short story. Like you want some kind of decision point for the character, and you don't even have to tell us which way they jump. If you read a lot of short stories, I recommend that too, because you'll see how different people handle different openings, endings, how much of the story is kind of on stage and how much of it is left to the reader to fill in the gaps. And that can be really interesting as an ending. I like stories where they've given me enough information about the character and we don't really know what's going to happen. But yeah, don't kid yourself that just because short stories are short, they're easy. They're not. And if you're doing StoryADay, you'll discover that some days I give you prompts for like a 100-word story or a Twitter-length story. Those don't take an awful lot less time than dashing off a 2,000-word story that just flows. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for saying that. It's a common it's a common issue, and I don't think anyone's, well, maybe some people have solved it, but I think if you solve that problem, you end up writing a formulaic story instead of just using a formula to hang your framework on. We were talking the other day about one of my kids is reading a lot of Asimov at the moment because for a school project, and he was like, yeah, he wrote them. They're all the same. They're all 2,200 words, and this happens at this point, this happens at that point. But he was writing them, one a month for his magazine, and he was getting published. He didn't care. It was easy to write them that way. So if you solve fiction, I think that's its own problem. Professor Ghost. Yeah, it's finding motivation to write when you are, there's a lot of, there's always a lot of mental health challenges in our world. This particular past year, I think, has been, not helpful, let's say. Any advice for finding the spark again? Lower your expectations. I know that's kind of easy to say, but I think if you can, I don't know if you hang out with any other writers now, but if you seek out other writers who are, or remember what it's like to be writing a first draft, we're always disappointed. It's never. There's a great quote from, I think it's Anne Patchett. She talks about how when she has an idea, it's like this beautiful butterfly up there, and she starts to write, and it's like she's taken the butterfly and she's smushed it against the page, and it's just this big, smeary mess. And it's like, ugh, well, that was disappointing. So everyone is disappointed that the thing in their head doesn't get transferred to the page, which is not super encouraging for you, except that it is, because everyone goes through that. And the only way to get through that is to keep going. To find the spark again, I think lowering your standards is a really good way to do that, because if you can trick your brain into thinking that it doesn't matter what you're writing, by, for example, writing a story a day in May, the win becomes, well, I wrote something today. And when you're doing it with other people, it becomes kind of fun. You go into the comments and you're like, well, I wrote something today. How about you? Yeah, it was terrible, but I wrote something. And it just becomes this kind of fun game, which is not to say that you should try and write anything bad. But if you allow yourself to focus on just writing something, at some point, you're going to start amusing yourself again. But you have to let go of your expectations that it's going to be good. Because it could be good. Even the crappiest first draft can be good if you work at it. But it doesn't need to be good today. And you can actually get to the point where it's kind of fun to write something and be like, wow, this is not my best work. But I know I can make it better. So finding the spark, think about what you really love. Read lots, especially at the moment. I like to read a lot of short stories in the run-up to StoryADay May, because there's so many different ways to write a short story. There's weird little list stories. There's ones where all the sentences start with the same letter. There's ones that are retellings of fairy tales. There's ones that start at the end and go backwards. There's so many ways to write short stories that I think it breaks people out a little bit of their expectations. Like if you come and do StoryADay and on day 15, I say to you, write a story entirely in dialogue. And you go, but I hate writing dialogue. I'll write it anyway. And you prove to yourself that you can do it, right? You did it. And what you might learn in the process is that actually you're not terrible at writing dialogue. Actually, you're great at writing dialogue. But what you need is to be able to let go of all the he said, she said tags. And maybe the way you write dialogue is with no punctuation. So experimenting, doing things that you don't expect to work, I think those are ways to try and really, really not putting any pressure on yourself to do anything with the pieces that you're writing. When I was playing the piano at school, like, there was no expectation I was going to become a professional pianist just as well, because I would have starved. But, there was no pressure for me to play like Barenboim or, who were the big pianists back then? I don't even remember. Manuel Axe. Yeah. There was no expectation that I would play like that. It was just a thing I was doing that was because it was good for me. And sometimes I didn't see that and I didn't want to go to my lessons, but it was good for me. And, my parents would drive me to my lessons and drive away again. So no expectation that it needs to be good. No expectation that you need to do anything with this. I think one of the things I've really noticed in the Superstars group is, because we spend the year together, there is a sort of sigh of relief as we get beyond StoryADay May and people make that transition from writing a story a day, and then they start to let their expectations go up again. And they're like, oh, now I have to work on some real writing, and I have to get my first draft of my novel out. And then, June happens, and then July happens, and we're still all turning up for each other, and we're still hanging out, and we're like, yeah, you know what? You haven't finished your novel yet, but there's kind of no rush. The pressure we put on ourselves to have a bestseller next week is not helpful. I don't know, is any of this helping? It is really hard, because when you're depressed mentally, it does affect your creativity. And I mean, I'm going to assume that all the things you should be doing, get enough sleep, get enough water, look for things that will bring you joy, meditate, whatever you can do for your meat sack that carries you around. Get outside, get some exercise, keep doing all the things that you need to do to fuel yourself, and look for joy. Julia Cameron talks about the artist's dates. Go to, well, it's tough at the moment, like going to a museum or a concert and stuff like that. That's tough at the moment, but going outside and getting down on your hands and knees and looking at the grass. It's not all grass. There's a lot of stuff in there, certainly in my lawn. There's speedwell, and there's clover, and there's earthworms, and there's last year's leaves, and just things like that anything you can do that can bring a little bit of joy in for a moment. That stuff really helps you get the energy back for the creativity. And yeah, just lowering those expectations. It's different from saying, try and write badly. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you don't need to be a bestseller this time next year. You need to write because it's part of who you are. And if you can only write a little bit because you're tired, then write a little bit. And then pat yourself on the back, like really genuinely celebrate whatever you do. Our little creative selves are little babies. They're little tiny children, and they don't know any better because they've been sitting there waiting for us to raise them. And if you've neglected your little inner artist for 20 years, like I did, it's not as mature as the rest of you, and it's scared and fretful, and you have to be nice to it. But that's the same with, your whole self as well. You have to be nice to yourself. So you're going to lower your expectations, experiment a little, see what you can do, and really, really genuinely celebrate any tiny win. Set yourself a tiny win. I will sit at my desk. I did this before Christmas. I was going to play the piano more. And I was like, all I have to do is sit on my piano stool, and I get to check the box that I did my thing today. And of course, once I was there, I'd play a couple of scales, try a new thing. So set yourself tiny little targets, and then celebrate when you meet them. And maybe it is just reading the prompt every day during StoryADay May, and then you get to say you won. You get to say you did what you promised. And I would think that if you are reading the prompt every day, you are going to find that some of the days you're going to want to write a story. Let's see, I've got another question here. I feel writing as a process rather than a product is the best mindset for producing more work and becoming more creative. Yes, I would agree. Getting into the habit of writing as a foundational habit has made me a better human being, father, and husband. Excellent. Good for you. I absolutely agree. It's, yeah, with any creative work, there's that distinction between doing it for the product and doing it for the process. I knit, and sure, I wear some of the stuff that I knit, and sometimes it's because I want a pair of, warm socks or a new jumper, but a lot of the time it's just because knitting helps me chill out, except when it's going badly. No, even then. And it's about the process for me. And a lot of times with writing, if you can focus on, all the time, I think with writing, if you can focus on the process, that's a great first step. And I love reading. I'm going to read that over again, that it makes you a better human being, father, and husband. I totally agree. Because you're feeding that creative part of yourself. So thank you for saying that. And when you're writing for a while as a process, you may find that you start to get a kind of like dissatisfaction with just that. Like if you're writing morning pages every day, like Julia Cameron recommends, at some point you may find that you're getting dissatisfied with just writing morning pages, and that's fine. Doesn't mean you have to give up the morning pages. It means you're ready for another step. When I was ready for another step, I founded StoryADay May. You may find that, when you feel a little dissatisfied with what you're already doing, you're ready for the next thing. You may be frightened by that. In fact, you probably should be, because doing something new is courageous. And that's when it really helps to have other people around you, because other people tend to see your potential in a way that you don't. We've all got very, very harsh internal voices, and some of them don't come from us. Some of them are teachers. Some of them are from voices from our past. Some of them are just habit. But we tend to be very harsh and unkind to ourselves. And other people, when you get to know other writers, they tend to see your potential. One of the reasons I do this, one of the reasons that I do workshops and stuff, is because I was in a writers group and I was talking a lot to the guy who ran it. And I told him about this challenge, and I gave a little pitch for it at the beginning of one of the meetings. And he said to me, "You're really good at explaining things. Would you like to come and give a workshop to the group?" I was about what? And he went, "Anything you like." So I went home and I thought, well, what do I find challenging in writing? And so I researched it and I wrote up this workshop and I gave the workshop, and people were writing in the workshop, and it was like everybody became happy because they were writing. So I got invited back and I got invited back. But I would never have done that, and I would never have put workshops on StoryADay if Gary hadn't said to me, "You're good at this thing that you don't know you're good at, and it's going to help people if you pay attention to that." So when you're hanging out with other writers, they can much more easily see the things you're good at. They can sometimes see the things that you need to work on. Sometimes they don't understand when's the right time to tell you that. So I rule the superstars with an iron fist. Not really, but I'm very conscious of making sure the community in the StoryADay Superstars is primed to give constructive criticism when people need it, when they ask for it. We run these critique weeks that I facilitate, and I set the tone as one of support and pointing out what you see that works in other people's writing, as well as asking them questions that will lead them to find solutions to the things that aren't quite working. And it's going well, I'll say. It's going well. People are enjoying it. And I got off on that tangent because, being around other people. It's been amazing for my writing life. I'm a little hesitant, like I put up the page this week that had the superstars success stories on it, and a lot of them said a lot of nice things about the group and about me, and it's kind of like embarrassing because I'm British and we don't really do that. But I put that out there because so many of them said, this group has changed my life. Being with these writers has changed my life. That I couldn't keep that to myself. And I hope that, you know, if you're in this Story a Day world, that you'll find a way to tap into that, whether it's through the comments on the just basic Story a Day challenge, which happens, you know, you just sign up for the list, you get an email saying the prompt is there, you go over, have a look at it, come back, leave a comment, engage with that community. If you want to engage deeper and you feel like you would benefit from going through those seasons of the year with us, the StoryADay community is, the StoryADay Superstars community is a quite remarkable place. And I can say that because it's not me that makes it remarkable, it's the people who are in it. I have set the tone, but they really are super supportive, and you know, they're gentle when they need to be, and they will, if invited to, keep you honest as well. So I think I have talked possibly @enough for one evening. But if you have any other questions, pop them in the chat just now, because I'm still here. You can reach me at julie@storyaday.org if you have any questions about the upcoming challenge, if you have any questions about the Superstars group. It's really fun watching people, you know, joining and the new names popping up. The group is relatively small. It's last year it was about 50 people. I suspect it will be slightly bigger this year, but I would think you know, it would be capped at about 100 anyway, because I think that's a good, that would be an upper reach of where we're able to keep it as a good community, at least until I figure out the next step. So it's fun having new people, and fun having returning people, and just getting to watch everybody blossom as writers. Thank you for being here tonight. I hope that this has inspired you. I hope I've convinced you that you can write a story a day in May if you use the framework and the 4-minute method, and just as a jumping off point until you've found your ways. Like, I don't think anyone can really teach you how to be a writer. They can teach you techniques that work for them. They can teach you lifestyles that work for them. I think the only person who can really teach you is you, by writing. And then when you get stuck, you go and find someone who can help you with that. And you keep writing, and you keep writing. Great to see you here, Almo. And everyone else. I'm going to read everybody's names off, and they're, you know, Professor Ghost and Quintus and Almo. Thank you for being here. I hope I've inspired you. If you have any questions, let me know, julie@storyaday.org. And otherwise, I'll see you on the 1st of May, when you will see me in your inbox, and I will be sending you a prompt from Fran Wild, a Philadelphia area writer who has won a ton of awards and is just generally a really smart cookie, and has given us a great prompt to kick off the month. So thank you, and good night, and keep writing.